Hi everyone, and welcome to this fun little roundtable discussion about UFOs, fossil light travel, and all the weird stuff in the press with the UFOologists who think they're some sort of professional mob, thinking that the US government is giving us great new information about the aliens coming to visit us. Well, with me tonight, I've got Matt, the almost a doctor, and the wonderful Sam Chaos. Hi, Sam.
Yo.
And I'll let you get us started, Matt, because I kind of stole Matt's topic.
Yes, I said earlier this evening, because it is evening for us who are ahead of the rest of the world, a message saying that I was interested in potentially doing a video because I've been watching some TV recently, because that's apparently still a thing, and I've been seeing a lot of ads, and I saw about 2 minutes of a documentary before I actually made my family change the channel because the pseudoscience was doing my head in, on UFOs, although I thought all the footage they were showing was done. So I sent Jen a message saying maybe I'll do a video on this, or maybe we could do a video on it.
You said
and
stream.
Should have put a patent to my idea.
Yeah, you should.
So that's the premise of this kind of show.
Everyone,
here.
make this worthwhile for Matt, because if you're watching this video later, or if you're in the chat now and you're not subbed to Matt, please go and sub to Matt. I will. I don't have his link in the description yet, because or Sam's for that matter, because I'm slack as all hell. But I will shove Matt's link down below. I will shove Matt's link down below. I can't find you in my list, Matt.
I'll be there somewhere as long as they're before the end. And I think most of your loyal followers have probably seen me a few times already.
Yeah. I'd say there he is. They are my list. So, if you aren't, go. He will be added later to the description along with Sam. But yeah, go sub to Sam as well. I'll find Sam's too. There you are, Sam. You're easy to find in my list.
Yeah.
So go Sam to the go Sam go sub to these two lovely people. So
and of course, for those who are watching, don't forget the like button down below, because we like the algorithm. Just thought I'd say that before we got into
and I
the
do
content.
have a Patreon now, and that link's not in the description either. This is what happens when you make streams at the last minute.
Well, if people can get me to 500 viewers, I'll like 500 subscribers, I might actually make a Patreon. Although I had my other mate earlier was talking to me about merch, so maybe we can come up with some ideas tonight.
Oh, cool.
Nice. I will eventually finish making the Patreon that Ocean bullied me into making.
Mine's not too fancy. It's there, and if anyone wants to throw me a few dollars each month, it'll help to pay for the internety stuff that I do, and the extra lighting and the soundproofing I want to do in here to make it actually come across a bit better and get my ass a bit better organized, I guess. The better you set yourself up, the easier it is to sit down and actually make the content in the first place. It's really what it comes down to. So, that aside, UFOs and people's obsession with this idea that we've got these alien spacecraft coming to Earth and appearing in what is usually very low populated areas, and freaking out the natives, as it were. So,
so I saw it was actually it came on after the news. It was a primetime documentary that was on Channel 7 here, which is one of the major, one of the
networks.
big major free to air channels in Australia. that was on this, and it looked fairly well produced, like high budget production. It was a load of nonsense, but I didn't get too far through it because, as I said earlier, it didn't take long before the pseudoscience was doing my head in. But something I noticed was that they're all like, oh, mate, there's aliens here. We can't be alone in the universe. And so what I noticed was can't be alone in the universe means somehow aliens are already sneaking into the world and are trying to take out humans or trying to show themselves, but only on blurry footage or in low populated areas or with footage that could also be other things. I will get to one of them later because some of the footage they showed was also the stuff that I know that people like Thunderfoot had done debunks of last year. So it's like, not new footage, and yet it's a new documentary. And that was kind of, I was just looking at it going, I can already tell that UFO is CGI. That looks like a duck, and that looks like the moon. Yeah.
It's like, but there's also, like Sam and I were talking about earlier, it's even in so many people's minds, it seems that they think that the
UFO equals alien.
Yeah, UFO is synonymous with aliens. And it's not. The term UFO just means we haven't identified what this thing is. And it's just...
Yes. It's science speak for the fuck is that?
Yeah, basically.
Yeah.
It's not even science speak, it's military speak for what the fuck is that? Because that's where the term comes from originally.
Yeah. Although if you want, Jen, I'm happy to get into, because I actually, although I'm not an astronomer myself, I am fairly closely tied with some of the astronomy groups.
Yeah.
So I'm happy to go into some of the things that they're actually looking for and what they would refer to when they talk about finding exoplanets,
I think we should get into that. What we would actually be looking for if we're looking for alien life, and we can look at. I think we'll also cover a topic which I was talking with Sam about the other day, with the new release stuff from NASA about the extra radio noise after the heliopause. So. Basically, now that the two Voyagers are in what is now interstellar space and not the sun space because they're outside the heliosphere, they're actually finding that space is a lot noisier, as in it is definitely noisy with static and sounds from other things, and the heliopause actually blocks out some of that outside noise. And it is so noisy that they actually think that the range at which we could get solid radio signals that weren't directly aimed at us from another planet, high-powered and aimed at us, is a lot smaller than what they originally thought. So if you're just hoping that you can pick up an alien species radio transmission of their latest, greatest rock band, that's probably not going to happen unless the star's right next door. Even with some of our most high-powered radio telescopes, it's just not going to happen.
Well, even before this discovery, the chance of us actually spotting another intelligent civilization is
low,
pretty low. So I think that the first bit that comes to mind when I think of that whole looking for aliens thing is that a lot of people in our minds, because pop culture and it makes for really, really good movies, is that when you hear the term alien, we think of, humanoid green men with either like clammy skin.
Roswell made them. Yeah, Roswell made them little grey men.
Yeah, the little green men. Although depending on which movies you see now, it's not necessarily little green men. But yeah, we get the idea. But when you talk to most scientists, so if you talk to someone like myself with a physics and chemistry background, you talk to a lot of the people I know who actually look for this. Like I know some of the professors and some of my friends work in astronomy.
I was just imagining what Dr. Carr would be saying at the moment.
Yeah, I actually, if I see him on Tuesday, because that's when he's normally in, I'll see if he's seen anything on this.
In all honesty, we should ask him if he wants to come and join us for a follow-up discussion on this, because it'd be interesting to get his take.
Yeah, I can bring it up to him.
Yeah, bring it up.
He actually prefers things in person, so if you actually have some way of contacting him, just send him a message directly. That's yeah. That's why I just send him a message. That's normally your best bet. From what I've spoken to him, he doesn't like people who wait. He likes people who just directly or even call. But back to that. So when you go looking for aliens, what most physicists, astronomers, chemists, biologists are looking for, whatever area you want to put it into, is traces of life. That's about it. And one of the areas that actually might be useful for my research or potential research, I'm about to get an extra area to my PhD, is gas detection. One of the ways that we think we might spot aliens could be as simple as spotting oxygen. Oxygen is not actually a very natural compound on its own, like O2. Yeah. I'm not talking about the element.
There's only a handful of ways it can happen naturally without life.
Yeah, there's very few ways.
It's it doesn't last very long without life to reprocess it.
So if you found an atmosphere like ours, it has a very particular color to it. There are wavelengths or colors of light that will either be absorbed or emitted depending on what you're looking at. Probably absorbed, I think, because where our atmospheres would be relatively cold.
Yes, yeah.
So
you'd be looking at the light that cuts through the thin layer of atmosphere around the planet, which is something that James Webb can do to really close planets if it spots any. So.
But we've got very few actual photos or observations of exoplanets, which is the other one.
What about four
is that
of
this
them?
is I think the first one was first one was early to,
and the first one was one that was actually being ejected from a solar system too. So
it's not that one was probably not going to harbour life.
Yeah, that's not at least not for long.
No, and probably wouldn't anymore because by the time we're spotting it, you go, oh no, it'd be pretty close.
A
couple of years,
maybe 100 years. I think it was about 100 light years.
Yeah,
away.
Actually. Yeah, because that's the other thing is that we're trying to spot things on a planet and we're looking essentially at their atmosphere. So if they're not producing something they're sending us, we're not going to spot it. But that also produces a second problem. So that's the first one is that people mix that balance. When we think of aliens, we tend to think more of some people tend to think more of pop culture. But really what scientists are talking about is just evidence of life. Like there could actually be life on other planets in our solar system. I've spoken to a number of people who actually say that there's probably life on Mars because we put it there because we didn't disinfect a lot of the probes properly that we sent there. Like that's just how good life is at clinging to things.
Yeah, so there's a good chance life is insanely good. You can find
they drilled down something like 2 kilometers under the bottom of the sea. So they went to the bottom of the sea and drilled a further 2 kilometers and was still able to pull out bacteria in the soil they got. Life tends to like living places. It's just complicated.
Stubborn.
Like sorry?
It's why panspermia is probably a thing.
Yeah, and that may have happened in the solar system. Whether we detect that or not is going to be a different thing. But so that's what people normally want. And then the second word is then when you go looking for that intelligent life, again, it may not look like us or anything like we think, but I think most people would understand that anyway. But it's also then the distances mean communication or detecting them becomes very, very difficult.
Especially if you talk
if you look at like
life, yes,
even if you look at things like the Drake equation, etc., which show that there's almost certainly going to be intelligent life somewhere else in the universe. That the universe is big,
pretty big,
ridiculously, many billions of light years across. Because it's not just the 14 billion light years across from the Big Bang, but there's other things because acceleration,
96 billion
moving
light
both
years.
directions. Yeah, it's quite a weird one. So it means that there's possibly life at the other end. We'll never see them. We'll never talk to them.
Yeah,
and too far away.
And it's not just that. The universe isn't 96 billion light years across. That's the observable universe. The actual universe.
Yes, that's the other one.
We don't know how big the actual universe is because the things beyond the observable thing we will never see. They've accelerated so much and moved so far away that the light from them will never reach us. That's our horizon for seeing the universe, and the universe. Yeah. Our actual universe could be effectively infinite. We don't know.
So, and that's one of the problems is that it becomes very unlikely. So that's why people in areas that similar to mine or just general astronomy are looking for the other things like I mentioned. They're looking for element traces for life. They're not looking necessarily for a signal, but that then kind of brings me on to the next point that I want to bring up is that when you look at our big programs to look for life that the scientists, the astronomers, NASA, etc., do, like SETI, the Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence, I think it is. Yes, that one is
SETI. Yeah.
Yeah, the actual goal of that, when you actually pay attention to what the scientists are saying, is not we want to find aliens. It's no, we just want to observe more of the universe, and we happen to spot life. That's cool, but it's a good way of getting the public on board.
Yeah.
The purpose of like SETI is just to be able to train telescopes and just absorb an enormous amount of data about our observable universe. Because when I said universe earlier, sorry,
and the best part about it for SETI was that the excitement of the public to maybe be able to detect these alien signals meant that SETI could entice the public into giving up computer space on their own computers to process some of the data, which probably would not have happened for normal astronomy.
So, Jan, I just noticed a comment. I don't know if you have the ability to bring them up, but Gary's comment there just quoted
pray that
Monty
there's
Python.
Intelligent life somewhere out in space. There's bugger all down here on Earth.
Down here on Earth.
Yep. That's about right.
Yes.
Now,
I think maybe that's why we're...
SETI, I think the other thing with SETI is that having something that the public can show an interest in is I imagine, a very effective way to get funding.
Yeah.
Yes. I actually just finished, like we submitted last week, an assignment for a course I did on science communication. It was an honours level, or for anyone outside of Australia, essentially master's level course on science communication. One of the things that we covered was, how do you involve the general public? And there are different ways of doing that. But sometimes it is doing things like this and saying that, we don't always know what the goals are, but hey, this could be something we get out of it. We could spot aliens, which is not a lie. Yeah. That's something we could do.
Oh, definitely.
Whether it's likely
it's something
or not.
That's true, if improbable.
Yeah, but it doesn't mean that there isn't other things that we'll discover along the way while we're on the topic of space. I guess the Apollo missions are another good example of that, where, the actual advance of us putting someone on the moon was nothing. It didn't really advance science.
Didn't SETI
but
actually
the technology...
Didn't SETI actually help us discover magnetars?
Because like
pulsars, they have
discovered
a
lot
signal,
of things.
But it was there were things like
we're
that.
We're still analyzing that data. Like people, a lot of the time, most people, when you think of astronomy, you think of people sitting behind a telescope, whether it's a radio telescope or a light telescope. But there is so much work that goes on behind it. One of my friends, his entire PhD, or her entire PhD, is just trying to analyze data that these satellites have got in. Sorry, these telescopes have got in. It's like there are people, like the data comes in, but that's not the end of it. It doesn't necessarily show immediately what is there. You need to go looking, you need to sift through it, you need to analyze it. There are also ways that you need to run programs to try and actually narrow down and figure out what you're looking at. I was recently listening to a talk where someone was talking about how we could actually with some cool maths, severely narrow down the error bars on the estimated ages for other stars. And one of the program I've been spending the last about month on, instead of my PhD, I've been doing a bit of extra work. I'm building an astronomy setup. I can't say too much about exactly how it works, but what it will do will allow us to get a map of the spectra for faint galaxies far, far away. And when I say a map for the spectra, I mean you'll know what colors of light are coming off which parts of the galaxy, which tells us two very, very important things. What is it made of? Yeah. And of course, then, the sort of things is like what's producing that light, how much of these things there are, what's going on, what sort of physical reactions are going on. And I say physical because we wouldn't notice chemical. And the second one is also because you can look for the exact colors, you can see whether they shift blue or red, and you can tell the relative motion of the galaxy. So this tells us not only what they're made of, but it can also tell us about their history. And we can also look at stars, things like that. There's so many different things that you can do with this. It's not a narrow field. So when they use something like SETI to get public interest, it's because it's sometimes difficult because a lot of scientists do find it hard to communicate with the general population. Again, that's one of the reasons I find science communication so interesting is because there's a definite need for it and the benefit. Sorry, Sam.
I mean, I'm trying to remember now, but isn't there a specific name for where sometimes a scientist will get looked down on in the scientific community for focusing too heavily on science communication to the public?
I'm not aware of the name, unfortunately. I wish I could help you on that.
I might do a quick Google because I feel like I know this one.
Yeah, there seems to be a thing, particularly in academia in Australia. I can't really speak for the UK though. I think your system's fairly similar to ours, and I think actually America is similar as well. Is that if you become a professor, so an associate professor, or just a supervisor, so you have a research group that you manage, you're also expected to teach, but that's regardless of how good you are at teaching.
Yeah.
But that doesn't necessarily mean you actually spend any time learning how to teach or learning how to present to a general audience. So that's also another area where you get some of these problems, is that a lot of the time the journalists, even the ones with science backgrounds, and I think this was something that the professor I was doing the extra work for was telling me, don't have much more than generally a bachelor's degree. So whilst they might be able to understand a fair bit of the science, because you still do a fair bit for a bachelor's degree, they may not necessarily understand how the research process works. It's like any industry, it takes a fair bit of experience, and that's not the fault of any individuals. It's just something that needs to be addressed. Yeah, but that's I couldn't sit here and comment on like how a lot of the finance world works. Yes, I have a degree in it, but that doesn't mean I understand how, say, to do the job of pretty much anyone in, say, an accounting firm or in like one of the banks, even in an area that I've spent time studying. That's just
there's a lot
you have to
more
work in it and have the experience to go along with the degree. Yeah.
There's a lot more skill involved in a lot of things than a lot of people realize, and I found that it was the Sagan effect is used to describe a stigma that comes in the scientific community for spending too much time translating one's research to the broader public.
Yeah.
Going back to your thing about the broader use of the radio telescope networks that were created for SETI, one big outcome we can see from that is the I'll call it photography, although technically it's not, of the supermassive black hole in is it M31? Is that the name of the galaxy?
Actually, I mentioned it in a video. So I did a video on last year's Nobel Prize, and I did cover it.
Yeah, I think it's M31, isn't it?
I think it is.
Yeah,
because we've got a photo of. So we didn't even get a photo of the one in our galaxy.
Because the whole point is that even though this galaxy is this black hole is a lot further away, because of its sheer size, because it's so much bigger than the one at the center of our galaxy.
It's about 3 or 4 orders of magnitude bigger than the one in our galaxy.
And it's not 3 or 4 orders of magnitude further away. So the fact of it is that to the radio telescopes, it actually looks bigger than what our own one does. Plus it's active, which ours isn't, which made it easier to pinpoint. So
but we do know where our one is, and we actually know its size, but we haven't been able to spot it. We've spotted the stars that move around it, so you can actually track out their orbits. And it's once you have a few of the orbits, it's fairly basic maths. And when I say fairly, I mean relatively basic maths compared to what some astronomers have to deal with to figure out its size. And one of them was actually, they got one of the stars because it was an elliptical orbit, but it was really close.
S3.
I think so.
Yeah.
That was, so last year's physics Nobel Prize was on black holes, essentially, and that included, so half of it went to Roger Penrose, which was just, he was the first person to say, actually, no, black holes are possible.
Yeah.
Even though Einstein's math showed it should be, he believed, no, it's not actually going to occur. And then Roger Penrose came around with a lot more maths to say, no, you can get them. It's fairly expected.
Yeah, and now they
found them. So that was, Yeah, and then the second half was observing
I mean,
these supermassive
there is still
black
the
holes.
argument of whether or not a black hole is a singularity or just a very dense region of space, because from our point of view of observing it, the two things look exactly the same.
Yeah, mathematically it's a singularity, but in terms of what it actually is, we still need to develop the physics, and one of the problems is we can't go to one and check it out.
And aside from that, even before then, the largest thing that governs what a black hole is gravity, and without a proper quantum understanding of gravity, we can't know what happens at that level.
Yeah. And we can't create one on Earth, because one of the problems is if you wanted to make one small enough not to do any damage, it'll evaporate before we had a chance to look at it.
Yeah.
Because that's actually one of the things that might seem counterintuitive, but bigger black holes are safer to go near than smaller ones. Smaller ones give off more radiation. It's to do with surface area.
Something Hawking radiation.
Yeah, we're talking Hawking radiation.
So you have the Hawking radiation, which means that they have to give off a certain amount of energy just because they have to have a temperature, or you break thermodynamics. And it turns out that thermodynamics is more important than the physics of black holes. So they still have a temperature, and that's where you get. And the Hawking radiation is how they still have a temperature. So the radiation that comes off has to come off their surface area. So if you've got a really, really big surface area, you can spread that energy out, and then so any area is going to have less energy. And so therefore it's essentially colder. I don't know whether temperature is the greatest way to think about it, but that's how they work. I did do a calculation for an assignment in physics where we had to figure out how big would a black hole need to be to heat our rooms, because dropping something into a gravitational well is one of the most energy efficient processes in the universe. So you could have a black hole in your room and throw stuff into it, and it would heat the room. And so we were given kind of some parameters. It was a fun assignment. I actually sort of
without heating your room without killing everyone in it.
And then the second question was is this practical? And so
not in any way.
The answer is no.
Because what would happen is the black hole would sink to the center of the Earth, because the center of gravity is.
Yes. Although I'm not sure about how the speed would go around it, because something that small. Yeah, it'd be a curious question. I didn't actually do general relativity, which is odd for a physicist, but I went through chemistry, so I'm kind of a cheat physicist in some ways.
So whilst we're on general relativity, let's talk about faster light travel and the chances of an alien species actually being able to get here. To get
not
back
impossible.
To
so,
what a words. So there's set. We don't have any way of faster than light travel that we know would function, but we have several mathematical models that appear to function. Yes. And two of the three models that I'm familiar with would get us faster than light in reference to some sort of warp drive, because that is the most common hypothesis, some sort of warp drive.
Okay.
We would require... we would require, for the first one I'm aware of, some sort of matter that has negative energy to effectively bend the time around the warp drive. Yeah. The second is I've only read the abstract for these next two and a general summarization by someone else who has a degree in the field. So this isn't like super accurate as to what it is, but basically there was then a mathematical model for optimizing the concept behind exotic matter without having exotic matter to get some sort of warp drive, but that couldn't break the speed of light. And then the third type I'm familiar with was one from Eric Lentz, which basically said that there should, in theory, be a way to See, I don't know if I want to read out the abstract to try and explain it, or just stick a link to it in the chat.
You can shove a link in the chat if you want, Sam. Sam was reading it to me earlier, and I said it sounds like technobabble from Star Trek. It legitimately does sound like techno.
I want to see this now.
I've stuck a link in the live chat.
Yeah.
It feels very much like technobabble. The relevant sentence would be: this paper overcomes this barrier by constructing a class of soliton solutions that are capable of superliminal motion and sourced by purely positive energy densities.
I understood some of those words, but not in that order.
Yeah,
it really does.
So I don't have, as far as I can tell, are a bosonic particle. They undergo Bose-Einstein condensation, if I'm not mistaken.
So, are they actually proven, or I think they're still a hypothetical particle, aren't they? Solitons?
Yeah. But you also get these weird things where they can be quasi-particles, where they're not themselves and individually something, but you get them when you couple things together. It does get confusing, but I'm not too familiar. This is going, like, this kind of energy, particle physics is a bit beyond what I've done. I'm a spectroscopist. I deal with light and light matter interactions and how you tell what's there, not how to get to another planet.
The reason I'm struggling to explain these is that I do not have a degree of any sort, let alone a physics degree. And so parsing what this actually says is a bit beyond me, besides having like a general idea what the abstract's trying to get at.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm just bringing it up now. I'm happy to have a look at it. But yeah, as I said, it's not my area.
No, it's generally... But it does. It reads just like the technobabble you'd expect out of Star Trek.
Do you want me to read it out, or Sam, do you want to read it out?
You read it out. I'm not entirely certain I'm pronouncing certain words right.
Neither am I, but we'll give it a shot. Solitons in space-time, capable of transporting time-like observers at superluminal speeds, have long been tied to violations of the weak, strong, and dominant energy conditions of general relativity. In other words, they're particles that are capable of moving you faster than light.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know why papers try this technical babble. That's another thing.
So they're more or less talking about something that's tachyon-like.
Yeah. I don't even know what a tachyon is in terms of these.
A tachyon's a particle that always travels faster than the speed of light because it has a negative energy density.
Yeah, this is beyond my area of physics, but maybe I'll spot something that can add something. The negative energy sources required for these solitons must be created through energy-intensive uncertainty principle processes, as no such classical source is known in particle physics. That's another way of saying we haven't got a clue of how to actually do this.
Yeah.
This paper overrides this barrier by constructing a class of soliton solutions that are capable of superluminal motion and sourced by purely positive energy densities, which is what Sam was saying. So they've come up with a mathematical...
Yeah, so basically they've said, we don't know any way these particles can actually exist or any way that it could possibly be made, but we're going to ignore that and we're going to say what their properties would be if they did exist.
Yeah. Given these assumptions...
Given that we're assuming that we can make them, this is what they can do.
And I think they're trying to come up with a mathematical model that does allow us to figure out what they would be. So yeah,
which is always a good way to start looking for something. I mean, well, we can laugh about this. That it seems all backwards. We're using maths to try and show something fantastical that exists, but often we start from this point and go, the math says
that's how this process works.
Let's find it because now we know what we're looking for.
The statement, we haven't got a clue how this works, is often the starting point of science. Is we don't know how this works. Let's figure it out so we can use it.
I mean, this is exactly
what they're saying is that we've got a potentially useful application of this. Why not? Let's try and see if we can get it working.
This is exactly what led to the discovery of the Higgs boson. It was mathematically proven that it should exist. So we went looking for it. This is the backwards and forwards of science. Science used to be very well led by observation. So we'd observe something, try and figure out what it is. nowadays we've got such strong theoretical theories for the universe, we can delve into the mathematics of the theory and go, well, something should exist if this part of the theory is right. And then we go and look for it. So we've almost turned stuff around to a certain degree because we're at the point now where it's so expensive to go looking for something. We really need to have a good direction to look in the first place.
And you can also come up with falsifiable methods. So you can say that if it's wrong,
yes,
then we might see, this, that, or the other. And when you go out and see something you don't expect to, then at least because you can go back to the model and fairly easily adapt it to actually figure out which parts of the model are wrong. So you can actually get there. One example of that was the amount of lithium-3 in the universe. They, for quite a while, couldn't explain why there was so much of it. So the isotope lithium-3, according to all the models, was like, well, there shouldn't be this much. And then they went back and they were looking at it and they figured out, no, there was an actual bit that we've missed. And then when you go back through, it's like, now that actually explains better. So it means the model now better fits. But they at least had an idea of everything else. And it was because they were missing that they could actually be like, okay, now we know what we're looking at, rather than trying to guess everything just by taking massive observations and then guessing, essentially. Yeah. But again, there's also why there's so much research that goes into analyzing the data we get in. It's not just, let's have a look. It's, well, we got a good idea, but we need to know what we're looking at now.
We have to know that we have to make everything falsifiable. So at that point, we have to look for the ways to falsify what we're looking for. You can't just say, oh yeah, we found this little thing that looks like the Higgs boson. No, we have to look at all the ways we could falsify this, and if that fails, then we're pretty sure that we found the thing that we're looking for. Otherwise, it's like, otherwise science is just guessing. And hypotheses shouldn't just be a straight out guess. They should be a very well educated guess.
Yes, and I think that's what... Well, I've heard some people get it wrong. I think most people know the difference between a hypothesis and a theory now. It's very rare that you actually have to correct someone on what a theory is.
Well, unless, of course, they're...
You talk to educated people, Matt.
Yeah.
Yeah, but even the people I talk to who are not that educated...
I had to correct my grandparents twice the other week.
Yeah, and I mean, if you talk to a creationist, you'll usually be correcting them every other sentence.
Maybe this is just maybe this is just me being surrounded by evangelical nuts.
Yeah, I'm in Australia, so is Jen, so it's not as bad here.
No, it's definitely not as bad.
No. And I live in a weirdly religious pocket of the UK.
Although you're not as bad as it is in the US.
We relatively frequently had guest pastors in from the US to speak at my mum's church.
Yeah, I was as my story's now up on Neil 604's channel.
You've been on
I used to be a
nice.
He's been on Neil's.
That was so nice. I enjoyed that chat, and that one I was raised Roman Catholic, so that was my background, but. Then also you have one side of my family is from Lebanon, and they're the Maronite Catholics, and they're like the Roman Catholics, but on steroids. They're the crazy Catholics.
So they're the evangelical Catholics.
Evangelical is probably the wrong word. I just let's just go with crazy. I think is a better bit. The story I told on that channel, I know it's got nothing to do with space, but it was altar serving, and I was given a silver plate and said, you got to hold this under the priest as he's giving out communion, because we don't want bits of Jesus falling on the floor.
The what?
We don't want bits of Jesus falling on the floor. They were talking about the host. They didn't want crumbs getting on the ground. And that took me a moment to compose myself, but
that's one of my favorite ways of phrasing that. Love that.
But like I still happy to help out, because it's quite it's more for the community, and you tend to do memorial masses after people have passed. There are very specific times that you do them, but it's very good for the family, things like that. So that's why I kind of do those things, even though they wouldn't have known, but I wasn't a believer, but I'm still happy to help out like that. But that's just one of my funnier little stories. Sorry, I think that's a bit of a tangent, but
Yeah, that's
Back
good.
to,
Humorous.
If the three of us are in a stream, it's built entirely of tangents.
Yeah, streams
Yeah.
usually go that way.
Yeah, but the next sentence I'm looking at is actually very interesting to me. That's the bit that caught my attention of all of this, was the solutions are also shown to be capable of being sourced from the stress energy of conducting plasma and classical electromagnetic fields, which is actually them going on to say, well, we actually have an idea of how we might be able to get these. And that's the bit that caught my attention, because it means, no, this is how we move forward. This is where we can find the solution. So, but that's how most abstracts will read. They'll give you a bit of background, they'll tell you the problem, and then they'll give you their solution or what they found or why you need more work on it. Because there are a couple of papers that go out that try and highlight problems with the current research. They're not as common, but you do find them.
Yeah.
This is the first example of hyperfast solitons resulting from known and familiar sources, reopening the discussion for superluminal mechanisms rooted in conventional physics. So that was the first sentence, but also that one kind of backs it up, is saying that, yes, these are very complicated, and so far we don't really know how we make them, but we have a possible solution for how you might be able to get there using conventional physics. That's how I read that.
Yeah. The general gist, as I understood it, is this could work in theory, the numbers check out, and we think we know what we're doing?
Yeah,
Maybe?
but that's...
We have a cool hypothesis, let's check it out, is basically what this paper's about.
Yeah, pretty much.
And it's a good example of how... Oh, sorry, Sam.
Go on, sorry. No, go on.
I was just going to say, this is a really good example of what we were talking about earlier, about how science works, is that you start with showing, no, this is likely. It's not, I guess there's no one trying to have some agenda in, generally speaking, there's not meant to be agenda in science. And so you come up with potential solutions. So this one here is like, this is the direction we go. And yeah, it just links back very well to what we were saying about how it should work and how it does work. But it also is probably a good way to highlight just how slow and tedious the science process can be. It's not someone in a lab who makes some discovery or someone doing some maths and then all of a sudden makes this breakthrough and, scream eureka. That's not normally how this works. Science is a much more boring, much slower process than most people ever realize, which also I think ties nicely back into all this UFO stuff. It's not going to be some all of a sudden big UFO showing up that only one or two people see. It's going to be a slow process. We're going to find something that indicates, wait, this is curious. Oh, wait a minute. This is not what we expected. Maybe this is an indication of life. And you slowly go through the steps. Or you'd spot something coming towards us and be like, that doesn't look normal. It's not going to start with, a couple of people in low populated areas spotting what's in Jen's green screen background at the moment.
It's not. I mean, unless... okay. If science fiction is accurate, if the Alcubierre warp drive is possible...
Which one?
That's the problem. No, but say if the Alcubierre warp drive is possible and you could have a warp drive and alien could warp here, then we might not see them coming because we don't know. But although I would hazard a guess it would still take time for that warp bubble to travel across space.
Yeah, and you'd probably... If it was bending space-time, you'd probably spot it.
Well, wouldn't you...
There'd be something
even though the bubble travels slower than the speed of light, the apparent speed would be faster. So wouldn't you get... Well, what is it? Chekhov radiation, where an object moves faster than the speed of light within a medium?
I have heard of that.
Your nuclear reactors have it. It's blue, which is kind of cool.
Yes. So, but it would still, it still leaves signs. So even when it got close, it'd have to stop by the time it got here. But that comes back to the other one, is that if you had one of these, you'd need to know where you're going.
We'd have some warning, even if it's just spaceship has appeared in sky.
Yeah.
Yes.
And here's the thing about navigating in space. Space is huge. Light moves relatively slowly compared to how freaking big space is. So, even if you set off and you're 100 light years away from where the light source is coming from that you want to get to, by the time you get there with your warp, even if you can warp drive, that planet, that solar system, has moved whatever distance it would move in 100 years from that point, which is quite a large amount of distance because solar systems move quite quickly around the...
Yeah, and that also comes back to the previous one. You need to know where you're going. So this is not going to be some random person, like in Star Trek, wandering through the universe and coming across civilizations whenever they just happen to bump into your path. You'd have to have targets, because also it's incredibly, from all the Sam, you almost sound like you've got a better idea than me, but from the reading I've done, it's an incredibly energy intensive process. So it's not something that you just look up into the sky and go, let's just go exploring.
No.
So chances are you'd need to have some good reason to go there. So you'd probably establish some communication, or there'd be evidence. But if it's an intelligent civilization that can spot us, there's a good chance that we'd be able to spot them. Or at least, maybe. I mean, it's a good question, but they would have to know we're here. So it's unlikely that they're going to just sneak up on us. They're probably going to appear, and after such a long journey, after all that, they all want to make themselves known.
If they're intelligent, they will probably also know it's not a super smart idea to make us jumpy.
Yeah. So if you think, like, one of the ones is, you can look at how humans have interacted with colonies, and I think this is also one of the reasons why certain scientists, like fairly big people in the science communication field, I'm trying to remember exactly who it was, who say that we probably shouldn't be advertising our presence to aliens, because look at how well most people have gone when a colonial power shows up. But I think space travel would probably bring in enough other aspects that would mean it wouldn't quite work that way. But when you think about, like, when people arrive on a new continent, they don't kidnap one or two locals or explore that way. They tend to show up in big style. I mean, you think of like Cortez with the Spanish. I mean, yes, that didn't end well for anyone except Cortez and his men who got filthy rich off it, and the Spanish Empire again got rich off it. Or you can look at Captain Cook arriving in Australia, etc. But they don't, like, you could probably look at those as some idea of how the aliens would go. There's no point showing up and not making your presence known. If you've made the journey, you'd want to communicate because you'd have your reason to be there.
Especially as you went to so much effort to get there in the first place.
Yeah.
The other thing, of course, being that it would be rather difficult for us to communicate when it would be any intelligent life will probably be seeing dinosaurs at best.
Oh,
if no. Zoom in up on it.
I mean, humans have. I mean, even if you go out, even if you just go back to the supposed birth of Jesus, even if you just go back 2,000 years, there's an awful lot of stars within 2,000 light years of Earth, and most of those will be outside. Well, are definitely outside of our radio range. Most of them would not even know that we'd had the ability to broadcast radio signals, and that's if you assume that if the radio signals got there, they were decipherable from background noise, which we already know they are not. But
bit of an exaggeration on my part, but it was more of a they don't know we can speak to them, even
no, they don't know how advanced we are. I mean, the chances are that any life form that was close enough to hear our radio signals, because they were normal radio signals, if they were using radio signals themselves, we probably would have picked up their signals through SETI. We would have picked up something that didn't look right in that spectrum. So the chances are there is nothing in what we would consider intelligent life within 100 light years of us. That would be a reasonably fair assessment. There could be life. The life could be, and most probably is, everywhere that it can possibly be. But it's intelligent life, and the thing that most people don't think about in these cases is that evolution doesn't tend towards what we term intelligent life. Evolution just tends towards survivability. Intelligence isn't necessarily required.
Yeah, I think humanity's a very good example of how it doesn't always tend towards what we would call intelligent life.
Yeah.
Go back to the Monty Python quote from earlier. You could probably make a good argument there isn't that much intelligent life here on Earth.
Dolphins maybe.
They're pretty nasty creatures. They're actually pretty
Yeah,
I don't want to.
No,
Without destroying Jen's channel and getting it brought down, I probably won't go into exactly why they're not very friendly animals. But yeah, dolphins are not nearly as nice as people think.
Oh
they are.
no, they're not. They're more like us than we would tend to like to admit.
It's the same way that other animals that have like an intelligence akin to children, like pigs, are more like humans than we'd like to admit to.
Yeah.
Capable of deception too. There was a paper that showed that smaller pigs are capable of deceiving bigger pigs in order to stop themselves getting pushed around. I thought that was an interesting paper. Even rats show empathy, sometimes more empathy than people. They will save other trapped rats on almost all occasions. There are many experiments to show that they won't shock a friend, even if that means that they'd get a treat for it. And
we do.
Birds
There's
are
been studies that
incredibly
prove
intelligent.
that.
Birds are some of them. Birds also in terms of language. So I actually know someone who can have a chat with their budgie. Like they can actually back and forward conversation because the birds have a similar ability to toddlers in terms of grasping language and understanding what meanings are. So there's no way, birds are going to operate a radio telescope and look at the sky, but they're intelligent-wise not as far off humans as we'd like to think. So, again,
the crows outside one of my friend's houses have started mimicking his speech slightly, to the point where they will say hello to him in his voice.
Yeah, crows are pretty smart. The Australian ravens, though, don't, which are, or the crows here don't tend to have too much interest in people, though.
Apart from to dive bomb them and things.
No, that's the magpies. Crows don't tend to do it.
The more I learn about both the US and Australia, the more I'm convinced everything around just wants to murder us.
We had an interesting comment from Chris in the chat where he said, we can't compare aliens to us, but the English did kidnap a couple of natives generally to study them. So...
Yes, but they did that after showing up in pretty big force.
Yeah.
Yes, it was hardly as
there was no doubt amongst the natives that the English had been there.
Yeah. Yeah, they didn't sneak onto it at night and grab a couple of natives whilst they were sleeping and then, anal probe them and put them back later in the morning.
They're like, here, let's murder 95% of you and steal like 3.
But yes, I would tend to think that if there's... I think we'd be unusual not to find... If there was an alien species out there that was intelligent in the way that we consider things to be... species to be intelligent and got to the point of having higher technology and everything, there's no reason not to think that they wouldn't be as aggressive as we are. Because you seem to need that level of aggression and desire and want to crawl up out of the mire and develop technology. You also have to have a disdain for other species.
It also, and this is going to get mildly philosophical a second, depends on the functioning of consciousness.
Yes, that's true.
Because if we have other conscious beings that are intelligent, we don't know that they necessarily function the same way we do from an evolutionary standpoint, or that they haven't integrated themselves with tech.
Another thing, I just noticed one of the questions from, I think, is it Brinker Duo?
Yeah, I was going to get to that one next. Yep.
Oh, yeah, you go for it then.
No, you can read it.
So Brinker's asking, is it possible that we've not actually set up to receive signals, or like the signals we're receiving may not actually be the signals that another species has discovered? So could they have been sent by another medium that we haven't discovered yet as viable, or we haven't considered as viable? Are we expecting them to communicate in the same way as us? And that's a good point. It's possible, particularly, we were talking about things like these solitons earlier, that there are methods of doing communication that doesn't involve having to deal with the limits that we've mentioned so
radio
far.
Signals or light, there might be alternatives.
However, that narrows the parameters down even further, because not only does that require intelligent life, that requires life that has gone even further than we have. And that's possible. I'd say good chance that's happened in the universe, but observable universe, but it depends where. But even if it's, whether it's actually close enough that we'd notice, that's also one of the other problems, is that we got to assume that whichever civilization has figured that out is still around, has actually still exists at the same time as us. But there are very distinctive signals that you can do, and so one of the things that we look for, that SETI was looking for, is something that is not natural. So yes, they may be communicating in a way that is not how we think. The point is that it would be communication that doesn't match with what we see in nature. There's some pattern to it. There is just it's been produced in a way that we just there's no explanation. Well, actually, I don't like going quite down that route, because that opens up another can of worms, how we think about it. But it was one of the things that came up when we first discovered pulsars, which are basically neutron stars that rotate really quickly, and the way the field goes, they're emitting radiation, and it points towards us, and then it points away, and it points towards us, and points away, and they have a very predictable frequency to them. And when they first saw that, there was a brief period where some people were saying that might be intelligent life, because they're very distinct signals. They're not what we would normally expect. But it didn't take too long for us to figure out, no, they're just rotating neutron stars.
Yeah.
And I think that was oh wow, Jaded Atheist just put a comment in.
Yeah, I saw that.
Sorry, that broke my thought. Wow.
I think the thing with spotting patterns that we wouldn't consider natural is, it's not necessarily that we wouldn't consider natural, but it's that we wouldn't consider expected on our current model, so that we can identify the inconsistent data and work out where the inconsistency is.
We see things like that all the time. Fast radio bursts and things like that have happened were things that like this, and when they were spotted by SETI or other groups, it was like, well, could it be something like that? Right, okay, let's go and rule out everything else. So let's go with the assumption that it's not aliens to start off with, and once we rule everything else out, we could go, well, here's something that could be. And that's the way you have
that's
to
also
do
the
it.
other point, is that it's a could, it's not a is.
Yeah.
Or at least but again, that's also why it can get hard. But we would assume that if there is another intelligent life form out there that is capable of this level of thinking, they're capable of coming up technology that is as good as ours or better, probably better, assuming that the barriers we'd have to overcome, they probably would have also thought of these things too. They're likely to be quite intelligent. We underestimate the intelligence of life here. We probably do that for elsewhere. They probably would have thought of these things. They probably would realize that they'd have to send a signal that is distinguishable from the rest of the universe. They'd have to know that another civilization would have these problems, that we'd have to look at it and go, I don't know. And so a good example of that was, if you look at the plaques they put on the Voyager probes, they do their best to put code and signals on them that overcomes language barriers, that deals with common things in the universe, that highlights, no, here we are, this is how we think. So that little golden plate that they put on the Voyager probes, now I'm kind of hoping that they do eventually crash into some alien civilization, but
crash into them, kill some of them, and then they blame us and come and invade. Timber.
Oh yeah, the original Star Trek movie.
Yeah.
Don't worry, I'm not ruining any.
We've had a few really
there's no
good
spoilers
comments
in what I've said so far.
And along with what you were saying about I've lost it because I scrolled. Yeah, because I'm stupid. Where is he? Binky gave an update to his things. Where was it? Yeah, I've lost it. Oh, is it possible that they advance distance aside that we are still fledgling? it is very possible that, because part of the problem with the whole thing of why haven't we spotted aliens, and I know it's a paradox and I can't remember what it's called.
The Fermi paradox.
Fermi, thank you, Sam. Thank you. Yeah, the whole thing is there are so many variables to the Fermi paradox. There's the whole thing of we only know about the technology we have at the moment, and technology can change, and there may be different ways to communicate, as we've already said. And if that happens, there's only this small time frame between when a civilization finds out about radio signals and etc., and when they move on to whatever's next. If there is a next, I'm not saying there is, but if there is, then there's maybe a few hundred years there of them sending a signal, and we would have to exist in the same time frame, close enough, or in the right distances, so we get the signal to know that they're there. And they have to be close enough that those signals aren't wiped out by interstellar space, because interstellar space is excessively noisy. And so there's that. But there's also the thing that, yes, we're 13.8 billion years into our universe, a universe that could possibly exist for trillions of years. We are right at the very early part of our universe. It is conceivable.
I just want to add something to that.
Yeah.
Once the universe gets to about 1 trillion years, let's say we existed 1 trillion years from now, we would not know that there were other galaxies.
No, we wouldn't be able to see them.
They would physically be too far away for us to detect.
However, we would be in a pretty big galaxy.
It would. We would have also collided with the Andromeda galaxy. But just to give you an idea of that expansion, that there is a good possibility that, yeah. So that also brings in other issues about distance. We have to assume that they're probably close enough to us. And I guess that brings up another question. What if we find some method of communication where, say, time and travel's not the issue, but they're on the other side of the universe? Observable universe.
Yeah, in which case we could never meet them. I don't care how. Probably never meet them, because there's probably no way to travel at those sort of speeds.
Just like we here will almost certainly not meet aliens, but even like any of humans ever.
Yeah, if that was the case. So I mean, we're at the point where we are early enough in our universe. Even if you go out to 1 trillion years, where we're basically in one galaxy, and you can't see any of the other galaxies, and it's an enormous galaxy. In 1 trillion years' time, the universe, any sentient life form that was in this galaxy, that was in what this galaxy ends up becoming, that's the universe they would see. That's 1 trillion years. That's an order of magnitude amount of time from now than what we've already had. Several orders of magnitude, actually. Our brains don't imagine concepts like billions and trillions very well, but it is an incredibly long time. In the percentage of the movement, time span of the universe, we're not even past the first day of the universe if you're putting out that 1 trillion years in a year.
And if you put not the universe's existence, but the whole world's existence into 1 year. So you did everything on a nice timetable with a calendar. Humanity's existed for less than an hour.
Yeah. So it's a nothing in that sense.
Yeah.
And we are so early in our universe, and so early in our galaxy itself, that it is conceivable that perhaps we are the first intelligent life form, not the first life form, but the first intelligent life form to come to the fore in our galaxy. And that might be why our galaxy seems quiet to us. It's probably unlikely that there's more than three or four intelligent life forms in our galaxy anyway. And our galaxy
is not down here on Earth.
Yeah. I had that conversation with my sister the other day, actually, that, like, relatively speaking, the universe is pretty fucking new, as is our planet, relative to that, as is humanity as a species. So the fact that we haven't gotten to where humanity's endpoint yet, fucking good.
Chris is giving us help from the chat, saying the universe is only 6,000 years old.
Oh yeah, no, that's right. Sorry, yeah.
Yeah, he apparently Dr. Kent Hovind told him.
But you gotta pronounce the Kent in a very Australian accent, very heavy Australian accent. No, it's
Chris would know that.
Dr. Kent Hovind, or Hovind. Anyway, I do like Brinker's question. I think that's a good one to follow up from what we were just saying.
Which one?
I think that they're likely out there, but we will never know, at least in the next few generations, where you guys are.
I think that's.
So I think Brinker's question is asking what. Yeah, and for me, I think it's quite likely we will find life or evidence of life on other planets within our
lifetime.
Well, at least within the next generation
Sam's
or so.
lifetime. I think Sam will be around to know that there was
not many
life, not many years between.
Yeah, there's not many years between Sam and I, though. We can't be too.
I just went with the youngest person.
I'm 19, so.
Yeah, there's only 7 years between us. It's not too much.
Not too bad.
But the other thing is also the amount of chemicals I've been exposed to in the lab throughout my degrees are probably not going to get quite as long as some, maybe. I keep making joke,
with my family history, I am expecting to live to maybe 70 if the planet isn't wrecked to the point humanity can't live on it.
Oh, yeah, that's another point. Yeah.
I am of the opinion that if I am optimistic and assume humanity does not destroy itself, which I think it will, then I think we will find some evidence of life in the next few generations, but we won't find the life itself for hundreds of years if we ever do.
Yeah. I think... Yeah, I'm on the same sort of opinion. I think we will fairly soon know, or at least be fairly certain that there is other life out there in our galaxy. But finding intelligent life, I think, is something that's not going to happen if it does happen for several generations. In fact, it could be the case that we get... because we don't need faster than light travel to start colonizing the galaxy. We could do it over several generations with slower than light speed travel, as long as you can get relatively close to the speed of light.
Well, do you remember the video I did somewhat recently on Project Orion, the nuke-powered space?
Ooh, that was fun.
There was an idea. One of Freeman Dyson's, I think it was Freeman Dyson's last ideas on that was how you could use one of those shuttles, because they are big enough to move the supplies you'd need for a colony. How you could actually go and colonize a planet near Alpha Centauri in less than 100 years. So,
because you can.
Yeah, as Jen was saying, it's a generation ship, and the ships that you can theoretically build. Project Orion proposed were like bigger than the Empire State Building, so they would be big enough to house most of your needs if you've got a sizable nuclear reactor with some fuel.
If we master fusion in the next 50 years.
Oh, you don't even need
a lot of time. 50 years.
A fission reactor will get you to some of the closer planets.
If
you're less than 100 years.
Fusion. Yeah, beyond that, you probably want antimatter. But
you'd want that anyway. But
ideally, you want antimatter for spacecrafts because the energy density more so than anything else. But if you've got good fusion reactors, you could manufacture the antimatter for your spacecrafts. If you start building a Dyson swarm, which technically there's nothing technically stopping us from doing that now. Financially, there is, but technically we
as vaguely at world politics.
I said start. I don't say actually build the entire thing. We could build arrays of solar panels in space, and we could get the energy back to Earth. We could do it.
Yeah, but we'd need to put it somewhere, and I don't trust we'd handle that too well yet. But that's the other thing.
My personal theory about this is to cope with global warming, we build a solar array, a very, very large solar array in the Lagrange point between the Earth and the Sun, and that helps to block out some of the sunlight, so we cool down the Earth a little bit, and we get all the energy.
Well, the thing is, we know how much energy, the extra energy the Earth is absorbing, so we can calculate fairly quickly how big this thing would need to be.
Oh, now there's a calculation.
I've
That
got
would
another
be-
There's a
calculation
video.
I've got to do for Mero first.
I'm
But-
just thinking. There's a video for you, Matt. How big would a solar
Yeah.
array at the Lagrange
I
point
have another
have to
video,
be?
and it might actually go up on Mero's channel
Yeah.
because I was chatting to her about it. I don't know if you saw, she tagged me in a question the other day asking what would it take to get a pimple into orbit.
Yeah,
and
I
I'm
saw
not gonna.
that.
I don't want to answer the question here because I've got so many ideas, but I want to save it for a video.
Oh, that sounds awesome.
But I don't have my proper filming
That's-
camera. This is just my webcam at the moment.
I seriously
So-
think you should do. Yeah, how big would a solar array have to be at Lagrange? It's Lagrange 1 between us and the sun, isn't it? I have to think about
so.
that. I'll have to look
You could
that up.
actually, I mean, you could actually, like, you don't even need quite that. You could assume something like a number of smaller ones in low Earth orbit,
But yeah,
and they go around, and you can fairly well calculate how much time they'll be, and you could do, because it'll just be, the maths is not super difficult.
so you'd
might
have
take
to
me a
work
bit to
out
get
how
there.
much light they block, and then how much of the energy they actually absorb, so that you'd figure out exactly how many of them.
Well,
you'd
you
need.
you can make them out of reflective material, so then it's not necessarily a matter about how
Like
much
the
light
orbit.
they absorb, but how much they just reflect back into space.
Yeah,
How much
they'd
they
also
stop here.
deorbit because of the projectile, and it'd be very bad with stupid cat just hurt herself.
So you have a number of smaller ones, and you can boost them up with small
Oh, you just
rockets.
yeah. Well, you can use electromagnetic boosts if you're in low Earth orbit. You can actually use the magnetic properties of the Earth along with if you've got enough power generation on it, and you can boost electromagnetically in low Earth orbit.
Yeah, but currently, the Earth is absorbing 400,000 Hiroshima-sized bombs worth of energy per day. Oh, well, that's 2012 calculations, but so it's probably
to
it's
lower
a bit
the
more
Earth's
now.
temperature by 1 degree, we'd have to figure out how much of that we had to block, and then how many solar panels we'd have to put out in space, and how much energy would we get for our effort.
We'd also have to try and forwards calculate to work out if we were going to fuck ourselves over in the long run.
Well, you can always get rid of some of them later if you need to.
Well, yeah, that's the thing with this. You'd put them up and down, and you could vary them.
Yeah, you
depending
vary
on
their
what
height, and
needs
it
are.
actually change how much energy they get
Yeah.
and how much light they block. So
Which is
could
why I'm
actually use
thinking you'd probably want a number of them in orbit, so that they go in and out, and you can.
And
you can
every
change the
single
orbits.
astronomer on Earth is just swearing at us for this because you have just screwed up skywatching. Okay.
It depends which way they're facing. And if they're in orbit, they'll be predictable, so you'll know where you're looking. The problem is
We
you
could also
don't
be
want them
really-
shiny.
We could also be really
backwards.
nice to them, and we could put small telescopes on every single one of them.
Well, no. The other thing is they're not probably going to be a huge problem unless they reflect light back to Earth, but that's not what we want. Because that's the big problem, is that they would expose too much of they expose any images you try and take of space. That's the problem that the astronomers would most likely have.
Yeah, we can build with non-reflective material.
No, well,
Yes.
I think
Well,
we've given
the
him Matt
side-facing the
enough
Earth would
material
not
for one of his videos now.
Yeah, I've probably got enough material for a few videos.
Sorry about
Take
that.
me a while. I might actually have a bit more time now that I'm kind of finishing up on that other project that I do for the professor. But I do like Heretical's last question.
Yeah. If aliens are here, then who built the Jewish space
I'm now
lasers?
doubting all of my. I'm now doubting everything.
Yeah.
Everything I think of the universe with that one.
Well, ha-
Oh, my answer to this is really simple. Apollo.
Apollo. So the Greek gods built the Jewish space lasers to fight off the heretical Roman gods. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, pretty much.
With space lasers.
With space lasers.
I've actually done a couple of.
That sounds like an
I've
episode
done a
of Star
couple of
Trek.
streams now on other channels where I have fairly conclusively said, no, you can't have space lasers like that. That's not how physics works.
That's not how that works.
Yeah. I did it on Truth Wanted. It came up, and that was one of the lighter-hearted ones in the intro. And it also, what was the other one? I did it on Mel's channel as well. We did
Yeah.
This Week in BS, and I do remember talking about
the thing
lasers.
is, people talk about lasers in sci-fi. Generally speaking, most sci-fis don't even talk about lasers now. They talk about particle cannons or plasma weapons and things like that. They're not talking about firing lasers because lasers are such a bad weapon. They really are.
Yeah, I mean, in fairness, plasma is probably also a bad weapon, but still.
Yeah.
I'm also thinking of what's the episode from Star Trek TNG where, because that's
lasers?
not new, that's old now.
We don't even need to put the shields on.
They're like, yeah, take down the main shields. Just they won't.
They're targeting lasers.
Pew pew. Yeah, because there's a reason we don't use them as a weapon. They have very good uses for aiming, targeting, observation, lots of science uses, but as a weapon, no.
The amount of energy you'd have to put in a laser to get a serious amount of work out of it to be a weapon just makes them not viable. Yeah. A missile is much more effective.
Yeah, like less than 1% of the energy you put in is going to come out in that laser beam. There's not our lab was getting a whole bunch of new lasers. I think they're second hand, but we had one laser unit. And the laser itself, the professor was telling me, is like less than a watt. Now, just to give people an idea of relative terms, these are the lasers, the ones I'm holding. Interestingly, the green one, I could actually do, if I turn the green screen on, you can actually like make images with it. That's pretty good.
Cool.
But these ones here, looking at a typical laser pointer, are somewhere generally less than a milliwatt, but they can be up to 5 milliwatts for the more powerful ones, particularly with astronomy. So they once you get to 1 watt, which is 1,000 times more, you now get to like permanent eye damage. But you still wouldn't. You can burn skin fairly easy at that, but it's unlikely you'll move your hand out of the way. This thing is still less than that, less than a milliwatt, but the unit for it, is not like one of these. It's like the old computers that take up an entire wall. Like I wouldn't probably fit it on my back wall there. It's a whole bunch of different cables and giant boxes just to deal with the power supply.
Yeah.
And this laser is tiny in this little thing, and it just produces one mini beam for a few centimeters that we use to write things onto optical fibers, essentially. I haven't even started work on that.
There are some.
I'm now
single shot gas lasers where you basically vaporize all the gas when you fire the laser, and they produce a lot more power for their thing. But you have to refill them with the gas. Refill them with super cooled gas before you can fire them again. So
Project
get a shot.
Excalibur.
Gotta wait.
Now I'm now imagining like a Death Star sized laser specifically used to just like cut through tanks or something.
Yeah.
It would be incredibly inefficient.
Yeah, there are better ways to destroy a planet.
Dropping a steel rod or a tungsten rod from space.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is true.
I mean, the easiest way to ruin a planet is not to build a giant Death Star. If you can build something that size, you can drag a small asteroid into a decaying orbit that's going to hit the planet. And that will wipe out all life on it. And you've still got a planet.
Well, you'd probably knock the planet out of its orbit, but you could always knock it back into orbit if
with another asteroid.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the other thing, of course, being if you have that sort of ability, why don't you basically just build a bunch of mirrors around their planet, around their star, and just basically focus a bunch of the energy on them there.
Yeah, the star's already there.
Or go the other way, put a bunch of mirrors between them and their star, and they'll just freeze, and then you just move the mirrors out of the way when they're all dead.
Yeah, there's a lot more creative ways to do it.
Enough of them. Yeah, there won't be enough of them left after that to deal with in any serious way, so you'd have a nice time on the planet. Maybe that's why Hoth was so cold.
Yeah,
if they're not dead, maybe they'll have some sort of serious seasonal depression.
There's
Yeah,
lots of
it's-
ways to engineer the death of another species without even having to build a Death Star. But the
Yeah,
degree
much
of
better
engineering
way.
a Death Star would require it is a stupid idea.
It feels really inefficient.
Incredibly inefficient.
I would personally just clone a whole bunch of Trumps and paradrop them on the planet.
Well, that's just nasty.
Secretly
Yeah.
vindictive.
Chemical warfare.
No, banned warfare, weapons of
warfare,
mass
yeah.
stupidity.
Weapons of stupidity. I like that.
At the very least, you'd confuse them so much that they wouldn't see you coming.
So what do we actually think? Do we think that there to follow the questions in the chat? Do we think that there is an intelligent life? Is it highly probable? Not very probable? Is it that there's another intelligent life form in our galaxy?
In our galaxy,
Yeah, let's stick with our galaxy, because anything beyond our galaxy is probably
I think
something
it's
that we
somewhat
would never
probable.
communicate with.
but one of the things I have is that technology, like our understanding of modern astronomy, particularly with radio telescopes, etc., all of this stuff with space travel, is less than 100 years old.
Oh, we are
And look at how far we've come. And it's accelerating faster and faster. So to put a limit on it and say, oh, I don't think in our lifetime we will see this, or maybe in this, I think it's too hard to say. So my general conclusion is...
what do we think is the chance of there being another intelligent life form?
I think chances are there is going to be
Something.
just based on the size of the galaxy, something we would consider at least partially intelligent.
Yeah.
In the galaxy, I
mean,
think the chances
we've already
are
got multiple
in
intelligent
favor
life
of it,
forms
but
on our world. So, I mean, whilst maybe developing technology isn't a requirement of... I think I said it wrong earlier when I said intelligence isn't a requirement of... isn't a goal of evolution. I think actually intelligence does sort of come out through evolution, because especially if you're a hunter, anything that's a hunter needs a bigger brain.
I think rather than does, I think it would be more accurate to say can do, because it can be a beneficial thing, depending on the circumstances.
And it has been a beneficial trait multiple times on our world, so there's no reason to think that it wouldn't happen on other worlds. But going from that to developing technology is a bigger leap.
I am of the opinion that intelligent life probably exists somewhere. I don't know. I'd say in our galaxy, I don't know enough numbers and stats to be able to make a guesstimate.
100 billion stars, 100,000 light years side to side.
My gut instinct would...
No, it's a bit more than that, because at the time the song came out, we underestimated the size of our galaxy.
Yes.
Yeah.
Have you seen
my gut instinct?
Mention and Brian Cox did a remake of that song where Brian Cox corrected the...
Yeah.
Yeah, I did like that one. They did it on one of the Monty Python anniversaries, I think.
No.
No? Was it, or something else?
No, it was on the Skywatch Down Under. Where they were at
I've just seen the song.
Big telescopes, yeah, and Tim Minchin joined Brian Cox because he was helping. He presents one in the UK as well. So,
my gut instinct would be to say I think some sort of intelligent life exists, but not interstellar life. But my position on it is complete agnosticism. I don't think we have any way of knowing. Yeah. That's literally just a gut feeling.
Yeah, I think you're right. We don't have a way of knowing, and there's no way. It's all just guesswork. I mean, if we look at the Drake equation, there are so many ambiguous things within the Drake equation that, you know, we can't even get close to estimating how many life forms there will be in our galaxy. Because you go through each of the terms and you go, I don't know. There's basically all of them. The only one we've got now is that there's a couple of them. We've got a reasonably good idea of how many stars there are in our galaxy. We've got a reasonably good idea of how many new stars are formed each year, and we've got a pretty good idea of how many of those stars actually have planets, because it's probably at least half of them. But how many of those planets are in habitable zones and could sustain life? We don't know.
But every year that goes past, we get a better
We do
understanding
get a better
of those
understanding
things,
of that.
and then as we get a better understanding of those things, we can also get we can narrow our efforts down to look closer and closer at where we're likely to find these things. So the odds every year that pass, every bit of information we get, and not just get the information, but I also process, of course, the odds of finding these things goes up and up and up. So it's really hard to predict that, which is why I agree completely with Sam about it's a completely agnostic position. But that doesn't mean that we stop. Say, we might never know.
Don't stop, because we want to know. I mean, it's...
But no, you say I don't know, but you don't say we can't.
We can't. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. And one of the things with that is that it goes all the way back to the thing I was saying with SETI, is that the purpose necessarily, even though we say it's to look for extraterrestrial life or extraterrestrial intelligence, it doesn't actually mean that that's the main things we're going to find from it. So like the project that I'm working for now is trying to look for galaxies, what galaxies are made up of. And you might think, well, what's that going to tell us? But it tells us about the history of the universe. But it's the technology we get out of it, the understanding of what we can do with fibers, what we can look at, as I mentioned with the moon. So this whole idea, the whole reason we look at these things is to get a better understanding of the universe around us, which in every sense of that is useful to us. You might think, there's no direct application of this or direct application of that, but we don't know that. There's so many times in history, so many times in scientific history where there have been, discoveries or theories that have come up with that at the time were like, that seems irrelevant, but decades down the path turned out to be super useful. One of my favorite examples, because I use it for my work so much, is the laser. Like it was a paper back in 1917 in the middle of World War I that Einstein published on the I forget the exact title, but it was essentially on the certain emission of radiation. Yeah, and it introduced the concept of stimulated emission, and I probably wouldn't recommend watching my first couple of videos on my channel. They're the older ones, so I was still new at it, but I do cover it, and I mentioned that one. But that paper was in 1917. We didn't see the first laser till 1960, but that was what kind of started us down the path. And yes, it may have occurred anyway, even if Einstein hadn't written that paper, but someone else would have written the paper. So we don't necessarily see where the science is going, but this is why I have no problem with science for science's sake. The more we can understand the world around us, the more we can understand the universe around us, the cosmos around us, because you never know, maybe we will be able to look beyond our currently observable universe one day. It gives us better technology. We can help each other better, and so I never see that as a problem. I know that almost turned into a rant, but
that's all right. We got a new question by Brinker. Do we think that the world would change dramatically with proof of extraterrestrial life?
Nope.
No, I don't either. Or just science getting a bit more comfortable with itself. I think people would just absorb new info into its own worldview. I think there would be people who would have problems with it. I think there's a lot of religious organizations who'd have immense problems with it.
Although I would bring that up with a similar thing to how they responded to a lot of, like, if you look at Australia, like gay marriage. Yeah, they have a problem with it, but
well, they'd have to accept it because we'd already found it. So
they would find ways around. People would find ways around it very quickly. Yes, you might find a few individuals who it changes their lives dramatically, but for the most part, even those who currently would look like their world would change.
Yeah,
they'll come up with ways of excusing it very quickly if it did.
Yes.
Well, not necessarily excusing it, but adapting to it. So I don't think, based on our most likely ways we're going to discover life, extraterrestrial life, I think it'll be amazing science, but it'll be like spotting Pluto or another planet. It'll be interesting, but
it'll be like when New Horizons got to Pluto. It's going to be, oh wow, look at that, that's amazing. But
after that, it's like,
okay, I think this would have been different.
I'm of a similar opinion. Well, I think it depends. I think the balance of probability is that it will not have any practical impact and so the change will be primarily that we'll have, like we've had a bunch of people whenever some new footage is released from a military or whoever, there's a bunch of freaking out, oh, the aliens are here. I think that will happen in that a lot of people will freak out over the fact we've found aliens and not listen to scientists saying we can't reach them if that's the case. And I think that in most scenarios we have of finding aliens, that is what will happen, but then that'll die down and won't fundamentally change anything. But I think that there are scenarios in which aliens become if we discovered extraterrestrial life, that it could become a thing we could interact with. I think that would fundamentally change a lot. And so it does depend. I just think it's probable that it wouldn't fundamentally change anything.
Yeah, I think you're right.
I think, but that happens with almost every scientific advancement that's on like kind of big scientific advancement that is front page newsworthy sort of stuff. You're going to get that, and so I don't think it matters whether it was necessarily aliens or something else big. You're going to have that problem with communication, just because the way people work. So, yeah, it'd be interesting. We'd all love to see it. It's just. The only way I can see it making a big impact is if it was as one of those more unlikely scenarios where all of a sudden an alien ship just showed up in front of the Earth. Not because I think the alien ship is going to be able to affect us too much, but they might bring technology with us, or with them, or they might bring some way of communicating with them. So I think very much aside, and distances mean that I think that scenario is very unlikely.
Yeah.
I have a proposition to make, actually, that I think it would change something permanently. It would become a significant portion of evangelicals' mission to reach them to proselytize.
I mean, they could try.
Yeah.
They could try, but I genuinely think that while it wouldn't necessarily impact a lot of Christians, there are I have friends I grew up with who want to become missionaries still. Yeah. And I know a lot of these people, and I think a lot of them would take a religious interest in aliens.
Yeah.
That is but again, I think because of the way they'd show up, the way we would find them, it'd be almost impossible for that to happen.
I think that would become their goal, even if they couldn't do it. Like, religious nuts are not known for having achievable goals.
Yeah, that is a fair point. But I guess you find that at any time in history, and
yeah, pretty much.
I think there's also
again,
the
would you say that's anything new? Or would you just say it's just the same old stuff, but with a new cloak on it?
I think there could also be an element of some people might actually find it both disturbing and other people comforting to know that we are not alone in the universe. There's that
I find it simultaneously comforting that humans are not necessarily the only thing the universe has to offer, but also fucking terrifying, because space is big, and that makes me think about those numbers.
Yeah. it is a very big place, and for the most part, like, if you got put anywhere in this universe, you're not surviving for more than a couple of minutes.
Yeah.
If you lasted a couple of minutes.
Yeah, the universe is entirely inhospitable to life, pretty much.
And to take a quote from Carl Sagan when he was doing the pale blue dot speech, is there's no evidence that help is going to come from elsewhere. And so the main point of that, I think, was that if we're going to fix things, we've got to do it ourselves. Yes, it might be scary to think that even if there is other life out there, it's fairly isolated from us. But that means that it's up to us. We're more important to each other than you could imagine then. I think that's all that highlights, is that we have to fix the problems we've got.
Oh, I so want to end there. That's just that's the high note, isn't it? It's where Sagan ended, and it's almost where we should end. And I think we've almost talked this subject to death, actually, if I'm going to be honest.
Probably. I think we've reached a solid conclusion.
And I think we've done really well to mostly stay on topic.
Yeah.
Mostly.
We've done very well for an hour and a half to stay on topic.
Especially for us.
So, I have put everyone's links in the description. So, if people you might have to refresh if you've been watching, but you should be able to get Matt's and Sam's links in the description now. And please go and sub to Matt and to Sam and try and get Matt up over that 500 so that we can, make him feel loved.
It's going to take a bit of effort, but hopefully we'll get there.
Yeah, you'll get there. Don't worry. You can make awesome content, Matt. And if you want some more intelligent conversation and some really good science takes, go and watch Matt's videos. They're absolutely brilliant.
I don't watch Matt's shit super often, but when I do, I binge it.
Oh yeah, you binge watch. That's how I watch Matt's stuff, actually, because I generally don't have time to watch it when he puts them out, so I end up binge watching. So Matt, why don't I've just sung your praises, but why don't you, to end out, why don't you tell people who you are and what you've got coming up?
Well, I think you've done a pretty good job, but essentially I make science stuff. So I'm a bit different to some of the other channels I've been on in that I focus mainly on just presenting science. I don't do debunking or anything, but I try and find interesting ways to look at things. So about using nuclear bombs for generating electricity, or answering the question, do submarines fly? I'm planning on making a video, the next one I want coming out. It may actually not come out on my channel, but it'll come out on maybe Nevada's. Haven't sorted that bit out. On how much energy, or how would you get a pimple into orbit? What would it do to the person's head? So that's kind of the next thing. I like tackling those sorts of interesting
Weird
twists
questions.
to science to get people thinking. Yeah.
And you're
So
good at them.
that's
And we've
kinda
given
where
you
I am.
another one tonight to make up for me stealing your thunder.
Or another couple.
A couple,
So-
yes. It's big. I can
couple
see.
dozen.
I can see Matt downloading this stream, cutting chunks out where we've said things, and go, right, I'm going to go into details on this. You have our blessing. And Sam, what do you got coming up?
So on Wednesdays at 5 p.m. Central Time, we premiere new episodes of Pub Religion. And this week we're going to be talking about, I think we titled it something along the lines of "Not Everything's a Sin," but we're going to be discussing people's propensity to assign moral value to things that are not related to morality.
Yeah.
And we will in a few weeks we will have the episode coming out where we had our first guest on, which will be fun. And I feel like there's something else I should probably be mentioning, but I can't remember what. So yeah.
Go sub to Sam. Please go sub to Matt as well. And if you haven't already liked this video, liked, and if you're actually in the chat and you haven't subbed to me, please sub to me. And if you click through on my thing, you can find my Twitter link, because I actually didn't put my Twitter link in the description because I forgot. But you can find that on my Patreon page as well, so you can patronize me and follow me on Twitter. No. But yeah, no, thank you everybody who's been watching, anybody who's watching in the future. We certainly all had a lot of fun doing this. And I look forward to doing some more where we sit down and we talk about science and stuff, because I've kind of missed it. And whilst I used to like doing this in the form of Stump Gen, I think actually sitting down and talking about a topic now makes more sense than people throwing us questions and taking us off the topic. So it'll probably be more roundtable discussions where we actually I get people in to talk about science. And I think, Sam, you and I need to introduce Matt to Maddie, if he hasn't met her
Oh,
already.
absolutely. So Maddie is my Christian co-host on Pub Religion, and she's studying meteorology.
Yeah. So she's almost a doctor
that would
too.
be an interesting chat. I'd love to hear more on that.
Yeah, because she's doing her doctoral thesis as well, isn't she, Sam?
Maybe.
Yeah,
My
I
brain's
can't
going
remember.
blank on that one.
I did actually discuss this with her, and I can't remember. So, sorry, Maddie,
God,
for
I should know
watching
this.
this later.
Yeah.
But yeah, go watch. I think on Will's channel tomorrow we're going to be doing a sci-fi stream where we're going to be talking about Stargate and Star Trek and a few other things, and we might actually discuss some of the science of some of those things. But I am planning a later on a proper science of sci-fi thing. It's so actually, well, I say I'm planning it. It's kind of been a topic that Matt and I have been talking about doing for a while. We just haven't done it. But I got a special guest I'm trying to tee up to join us for that. So that should be fun once we've got that going. And there isn't going to be a What the Fuck show this week because I have a doctor's appointment when the show would normally be. So I believe we will be doing a sewing circle, and I have no idea what the topic is. Aside from that, look out for a new quiz show that Kitty, Will, and I are going to be doing, which should be coming out in the next few weeks. It'll be pre-recorded. It won't be a live show, but it should be a lot of fun. So yeah, that's about all I've got on. So
I've just remembered.
Go for it.
One Ring 42 is having
the Q&A.
Instead of Media Musings tomorrow, is having a gender and sexuality Q&A for Pride Month.
So if you want to ask questions, come on.
I will be on the panel, as will Ring and Jen, and I think a couple of other people too. But
yeah,
I feel like Noodle should be there.
Noodle should be there. I nearly said the wrong name. But yeah, so there'll be a few of us there who'll be there to answer the questions, and should be good. It should be good. Matt will be asleep when that happens, but he can watch it later. All right, thank you everybody, and have an awesome night. Bye.